your power!
Shut up and sit down. Shut up and sit down.
So, some 2 or 3 years ago, I made this, and I'm terribly ashamed, and I have no freaking idea why I did it this way, but this is the soft star shunt. And it's just a bunch of really heavy-duty resistors. If I'm reading it right, that should be 15 kilo ohms and 10 kilo ohm resistors. I think they should, this one and this one should be the same, as well as this one and this one is the same. So if I'm not mistaken, it should be two 10 kilo ohm resistors and two 15 kilo ohm resistors in parallel. So if that is the case, I should, if I measure this with my multimeter right here, and yes, my desk is a mess, I should get 3.4, but not kilo ohms, but just ohms, which brings me to, it's 15 RJ, 10 RJ. It's not K, there's no K, so yes, I'm just retarded. So it's not kilo ohms, it's ohms. So I take it, it's 15, 15, 10, and probably 15, because if I put those numbers into, so let's not act like it's all 15 kilo, it's just 15, and then it's not 10, but again 15, and single 10 ohm resistor, calculate 3.3, it's odd. Now, I don't really know why, but of all the combinations I can come up, because I have a 4.7. If it was in kilo ohms, it would be 4K7, not R7. Jesus Christ, I'm great with talking again today. And I have 4.7, 10 and 15, and 8 ohms. And of all the combinations I can come up with, I get 2.6 if it was 215s, because you can see there is 115, 110, and again another 15. So we have to calculate with 2 15s, 110, and then it's either 8, which gives us 2.79 ohms, or we can say it's 4.7, in which case it's 2.24, or it's 10 ohms, in which case it's 3, or it's another 15, and in that case it's 3.3. I can imagine that my shitty soldering here might produce some transition resistance, but I'm not sure if... Well, actually 0.2 ohms ain't that much, so maybe it's just my shitty soldering. Anyway, we can pretend this monstrosity, and I think that the why I made this, and not just like each of these resistors costs about 80 cents, and I'm a cheapo, so once I bought all the resistors and I figured out I needed only 3 ohms, what I did was I just connected those resistors in parallel. So what I figure is, if I connect the motor in series with this monstrosity, which is 3.5 ohm monstrosity, and the power source, which is somewhere in there, and the power source can take up 3 amps if I'm not mistaken, or give 3 amps. So if I connect all of this in series, the motor runs and starts just fine. It just doesn't spin at correct RPM, so the suction produced isn't all that great. And by field testing, I figured that if I connect a 4.7 ohm in parallel to this shunt, it raises the RPM, and that's because if we calculate again, let's change the number of resistors in parallel to 5, and then it's, well, we can do it by 2, and let's say that the monstrosity here is 3.5 and the second is 4.7, then the resistance is actually, yeah, it's lower. It's 2. It's not 3.5 but 2. So actually, by connecting another resistor into parallel, you lower the total resistance of all of this, because the current will not flow just through one of these things, but through all of them. So it is like a river splitting into a meandering in a river delta. The individual flows are small, but if you combine them together, you get a surprisingly high number. So yeah, so let's do it. What I'll have to do is probably make another connection which goes between here and the power connector, and to the cable I will connect this thing, and from here it will lead to another switch which is not here but it's still in the body here, and into the motor, which are not into the motor, but there is this, I don't know what did I meant by that, just a cable, and then there is this terminal, and it continues with another cable to the motor, which doesn't make a lot of sense given the color is green yellow, which is the protection. At first I thought I'm gonna be using this kind of terminals, but it turns out I don't have any more of them at home and I would have to buy new ones. So what I did is I disconnected some of the terminals from the already installed wires and rearranged them as needed, then connected the wires with screw connectors. I'm not really sure how these are called in English, but this little thingy you use when you want to connect two cables together, as in when installing a new light or something. And I also rearranged the switches, so now the old switch, which originally was the only switch on this vacuum, again turns it on, and at this point all the current flows through these four resistors, through the 3.5 ohms shunt, and by flipping the switch on the bottom, the current will start flowing through the 4.7 and 3.5 ohm resistors, which will give us only 2 ohms of resistance in total, thus increasing the RPM. Now, the thing with electric motors, in this case a small DC motor from a burned out micro tool, the thing is, when they spin up, the rotor windings move through the magnetic field of the stator magnets or stator windings, depending on the type of the motor. And since when you move a wire or a conductor through magnetic field, the magnetic field generates voltage between the both ends of that wire. So just by rotating within the magnetic field, there's a voltage induced between the ends of the windings. That voltage works against the voltage you supply to the motor so that it moves. The electric resistance of the motor increases, and it limits the current that can flow through the windings. And this is basically what counter EMF is. Now the problem is when you want to start it from a dead stop, the rotor is stationary. It cannot generate anything. So total electric resistance of the motor is equal to sum of the impedance of the windings and its actual electric resistance, which should usually be somewhere below 1 ohm. And when you flip the power switch, it basically acts as a short, because in fact it's just a bunch of coils inserted into the circuit, and some power sources just don't like it. I'm not saying that it will always cause trouble, but some power sources have built-in fail-safe mechanisms, and if the reaction time of the failsafe is short enough, the setup will not start. If it is a resettable fuse, the motor will try to spin up. Since the EMF is low, in low RPMs, the inrush current will trigger the failsafe, shut off the current. The motor stops again, then the failsafe resets, and there is voltage applied to the input terminals of the motor. And again, it tries to spin, but the counter EMF is low, so again, inrush current, and the switch flips again, and over and over and over again, and it won't stop. Now, if you have some circuit which is protected by a blowout fuse, chances are the fuse won't act as quick and it will basically ignore the inrush current. But if you have some electronic failsafe mechanism in the power source, then it might give you problems. So that's why you need something like a soft start, which usually is just a circuit which for the starting of the motor inserts a resistor in series with the motor so that it limits the current flowing through the motor initially, and then once it spins up and the counter EMF increases the resistance of the motor, then you just disconnect the resistor and let the motor be connected directly to the power supply.
Keep DIY and live out the fronty way.